Share online.
That's a double pun, Bob.
A double entendre, yeah.
Right. Okay.
Bob, you are a real side splitter.
Yeah. Okay. Year of Learning sponsors: Dr. Paul Koningsberg in memory of his brother, Dr. Sam Koningsberg, Shimon Reuven ben Lebish, and Ed Goldberg's cousin, Nissen Hara Nissen ben Fardosa. Paula and Bob Bromberg in memory of their dear friend Julian Smith, Yehuda ben Yisrael. Malka Mann in memory of her family murdered in the Holocaust. Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Many friends of Dr. Marvin Blush, Rosh Hashanah ben Yitzchak Halevi, friends of Toby Paris, Saratova bat Yisrael Dov, friends of Malka Levi, Malka bat Yosef, friends of Avi Gidler, Avram Meir ben Shimon, Cheryl Sher, her children and grandchildren in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Arav Akiva, Marsha Federbush and family in memory of her husband, Dr. Uriel Paul Federbush, Uriel ben Harav Shimon. A month of learning sponsored by Haran and Mel Haller in memory of her mother, Malka Rachel bat Yehuda Leib. A week of learning sponsored by Gedalia and Phyllis Reese in memory of his father, Harav Chaim ben Shraga Feivel. Also by Oscar and Shelley Moll in memory of his father, Shlomo ben Yitzchak, and mother, Rachel bas Naphtali. Okay, today is the 5th of January, a day of learning by Leona and Walter Friedrichs in memory of her father, Aaron ben Yankel. And that is it. May the Shamas have an Aliyah, Kranker Rafia, Velti Yashir Hashem Etzaliyah, and the Chol B'nai Israel a good gebenched Yar.
Amen.
Amen.
Right, we'll wait to hear from those from the shul that we know that are here, see how they lucked out this morning. Find out later and share that. Okay, today's Gemara is Mem Hey, Amud Aleph, correct? I don't assume that we've seen any new lists yet. Harvey, if you see it, let me know, all right?
No, I haven't seen it yet. I went on
Dan
to the,
Israel.
the old site, yeah, in Woodmere, and it wasn't there.
Okay. I would hope that they will get it out, set it up soon. It's a good format there. Okay. What I want us to do today, as we go through the Gemara, is look at the situation. We were very, as Bob put it to me yesterday, it's like ping pong balls, back and forth, back and forth. Was it Chometz Nukshe? Was it Chometz Tarovet? Was it according to this Rebbe, the Rebbe Eliezer? Was it according to Rebbe Meir? Back and forth. Okay, right. And so, as we're going to finish up this sugya, I'm going to go back to the bottom of Mem Dalet Amud Beis, even though we went over a tiny bit, to pick up. Okay, because I think that's the easiest place to start it.
That's where we stopped yesterday.
Right, right. So it's about 5-6 lines up from the bottom. Okay. Amar le Rav Acha Barei the Rav Avia the Rav Ashi. So that's who the conversation now is going to go between Rav Acha Barei the Rav Echia and Rav Ashi. Mid Rabbanan, in regards to the rabbis, Nishmala Rabbi Akiva. We should be able to hear, in other words, learn the position of Rabbi Akiva. Milo Amre Rabbanan Misrat, wasn't that the rabbis held, like Rabbi Yochanan, that based on Misrat, the phrase regarding Nazareth, you could therefore talk about mixtures, litain tam ki'ikar, okay? But they learned that not so much for mixture, but they learned it as the basis for the concept of tam ki'ikar, that principle of the taste being equal to the substance. Mikan, says the Gemara, atadan lekol isurin shebatorah. One should therefore be able to say that this would apply to all other prohibitions in the Torah. The Rabbi Akiva, on the other hand, regarding Rabbi Akiva's view, Nami misrat leheter mitztaref leisur. He also uses that same pasuk regarding Nazarethship, but he learns it for something else, namely, leheter mitztaref leisur, that a permitted item, when combined with a prohibited item, results in the prohibition. Mikan atadan, excuse me, lekol isurin shebatorah kula. Okay, so they're both Rabbanan and Rabbi Akiva are darshaning the same pasuk, but for different purposes. Rabbis are learning it for tam ki ikar. Rabbi Akiva seems to be learning it to learn Isur and Heter mitztaref. Okay, that's where we sort of left off, right? Now we pick up again. Tells us, Amarle. So Rav Ashi is now saying back to Rav Acha Berei the Rav Aviyah the following. Top of Memhe Amud Aleph. Mishum dahava nazir, since we see the example, I'm going to use that phrase, with the darshaning regarding nazir, vichatat, and we also have elsewhere an example regarding chatat, a sin offering. These two different psukim, shnei ktuvim habaim ke'echad. They are really two that are teaching the same principle. And we have a concept, ve'ein melamdin, that you can't learn something new from two psukim that are teaching the same principle. Nazir, dahada amran. Nazir, as we have said, based on Mishrat, right? However, now, chatat, so now the Gemara is going to bring us the citation of the pasuk regarding chatas. Chatas maihi, with regard to chatas, what is that? The Tanya, as taught in the Braita. Kol asher yiga bisadeh. In other words, what are we saying here? Anything that, kol asher yiga bivsara. That with one who touches the meat, yikadesh, it becomes consecrated, v'gomer, etc. Yachol afilu lo bal'ah. It's possible that we might say that even if one didn't swallow it. Talmud lomar bivsara. Here, however, the text says bivsara, with its meat. In other words, that prohibited and permitted substances join. Yikadesh, becomes consecrated. Ad sheyivla basar, until the meat is swallowed. Yikadesh, that's when it becomes consecrated. Liot kamoha. No, it becomes like it. She'im psulahi, because if that was invalid, tipasel, it becomes invalid. Ve'im ksherahi, and if it's still valid, teochel, it becomes eaten. How must it be eaten? Kechamor, like the stringencies normally associated Shabbat, associated with it when it is a status of Kodesh. So the implication is something mixed with the chatat, takes on the status of the chatat. Okay, so it's again an issue of combinations. Okay, v'Rabbanan nami, and the rabbis also. Nahave nazir v'chatat shnei ktuvim habaim ke'echad ve'ein melamdim. And as for the rabbis also, okay, we can assume, we can say that in the psukim regarding Nazir and Chatat, here too we have two verses that come to teach the same thing, implying that prohibited and permitted items do join together, okay? Va'ein melamdim, and they must also hold that one can't learn a principle from the same two psukim. Amrei, therefore I might say, Hinu mitzrich tzrichi, that they, namely the rabbis, are saying each of these psukim are separate. They're each required to learn something different. So from a single pasuk, you can derive a new principle, but not from two psukim teaching the same lesson. For Rabbi Akiva, Mai Tzrichi, and as Rabbi Akiva, okay, doesn't he hold that each pasuk, in this case of Nazir and Chatat, are separate and teach one thing? Bishlema ikatav Rachmana bechatat. That's acceptable if the Torah had only written in regards to the Chatas. Lo gamar nazir mina, that one is not then able to learn regarding combinations vis-a-vis Nazareth from it. Why? Dichulin mikadshim lo gamrinan. Why? Because we can't learn about unconsecrated offerings or items from consecrated items. Ela lichtov ramachmana benazir. But rather, the Torah has to write it specifically in regards to the Nazareth. V'tite chatat. So the Gemara then continues. So let's teach chatat, v'tigmor mina, and learn from that. Daha kol ha'isurin shebetorah kagamar minazir. Because then we could say that all of the prohibitions regarding Torah, regarding mixtures, we could learn from the example of the pasuk of Nazir. V'Rabbanan amrei lach, and the rabbis would then say to you, mitzrach tzrichi. No, that each of these verses are needed for their own explanations. Chatat, regarding to chatat, what did they learn from that? Leheter mitzaref leisur, that something permitted may be mixed with something forbidden, and therefore it's forbidden. V'chulin mikadshim lo gamar, and that also, okay, we can't learn something about chulin, unconsecrated items, from consecrated items. Misrat, and regarding the verse of Misrat referred to by the Nazareth, litain tam ki'ikar, that will give us then the principle of tam ki'ikar, that the taste is like the substance. Umikan atad dan lakol hatura kola, and from here you can then do a kal v'chomer to learn that principle for all the rest of the Torah. So Gemara now raises the following point. For Rabbi Akiva, travaihu lahater mitztaref leisur. He would say that both psukim, that regarding Misrat and that of Nazir, and that regarding Chatas, that from the two of them you may learn the principle of mixtures. Okay, permitted and prohibited joining together. Vahavu laho shnei ktuvim habaim ke'echad, and that one can have two verses teaching the same idea. V'kol shnei ktuvim habaim ke'echad, and all two verses that come to teach the same idea. Ein melamdin. Don't we say, though, that they can't learn from that? Amar le Rav Ashi, the Rav Kahana. And so now Rav Ashi says to Rav Kahana, Elaha Tanya. Okay, but what about the following Braita that teaches Mikol Asher Yaaseh Migefen Hayayin Michartzanim Va'ad Zag? Okay, that the pasuk says from all or any, okay, that comes from the vine, whether of grapevine, whether it be the chartzanim, the seeds, so to speak, va'ad zog, or the grape skin. Limeid al hi'isur nazir shemitztarfin ze im ze, that can come to teach us regarding the prohibition for the Nazirite that items do join one to another. Okay, because if a Nazir were to have, okay, both, let's say, a olive's amount of chartzanim, of the seeds, and an olive's amount of the skin, they would join because of kol, of all. Now, hashta, here, the Rabbi Akiva, asur veheter mitztarfin, and therefore here, okay, permitted and prohibited items join. Okay, isur ve'isur mibaye. Do we have to say? Do we have to even need a pasuk that would tell us that two aspects that which are both prohibited, that they join together? Do we even need a pasuk to tell us this? Amarle. Okay. So we now see that Rav Kahana says back to him, Isur veheter bevat echat. There is a difference, that we do need that pasuk. Why? Because when we have permitted and prohibited items joined, that's when it occurs at the same time. Isur ve'isur b'zeh achar zeh. When it's two examples of isur, how do they mitztaref? At what point do they join? When one is after the other. And that ends that particular sugya. Okay? I don't see Ted on this morning, huh? Or Erwin, okay. All right. Our new Mishnah. Batsek shebesidkei areva. We have dough that is found in the cracks of a kneading bowl or a kneading trough. Okay? Think of a big wooden bowl, right? That the baker or whoever, woman, if she's baking, is rolling her dough and kneading it, and right? Im yesh kazayit b'makom echad, if there's a measure of a olive amount in one place, in one major crack, let's say, chayav leva'er, one is obligated to remove it, destroy it, eliminate it. Ve'im lo, and if not, batel b'mi'uto, then we'll say that it is, so to speak, nullified, okay? Removed because of its small amount. Now that could be because of it's less than a kazayas. Now the Mishnah continues. Having said that, we're going to go perhaps, not perhaps, but clearly the Mishnah wants us to take another example. V'chein le'inyan hatuma. And likewise in regards to impurity. Im makpid alav. If a person is strict about it, in other words, concerned, it bothers them, chotzeitz, then that dough that's in that crack is a interposition. Right? Ve'im rotzeh b'kiyumo. But if they want that dough there, namely their attitude is fine, that dough will harden and it will seal up the crack in the kneading trough, the kneading bowl. Harehu ka'areva. Then the Mishnah says it's going to be considered as if it is part of the kneading trough itself. Gemara. Our Gemara says the following. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. He says, Lo shanu ela b'makom she'ein asuyin lechazek. That applies, in other words, our statement, the Resha of the Mishnah, only applies, okay, where the person wanted to, where we learned that it came, the dough, hardened dough over the crack, was done for reinforcement of the bowl, okay? Aval b'makom she'asuyim lechazek. Okay, that was if it's not in for reinforcement, but in a place, let's say like the back side of the bowl or the underside of the bowl, okay, right, where it's done for reinforcement, eino chayav leva'er, then one does not have to destroy it, right? Miklal, based on the principle, depachot mikazayet, that if it's less than a olive's a measure, afilu b'makom she'ein asui lechazek, even in a place, okay, where it's not made to reinforce the bowl, eino chayav leva'er, one is not obligated, liable to destroy it, remove it. Now, says the Gemara, okay, this was what Rav Yehuda added. Okay, now, Ika dematne la asefa. There are those, however, who teach this in regards to the end part. Okay, what does it mean, the end part? Namely, ve'im lav batel b'mi'uto. Okay, right, that part, right? It's still what we would call the end of the Resha. Ve'im lo batel b'mi'uto. Okay? Right? We're saying that if it were not, okay, there to, okay, if that's the case, okay, if it's a small amount, it would be nullified. Right? Now, what happens? Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Lo shanu. Again, Rav Yehuda is saying the same thing. They didn't teach this. Ela b'makom ha'asui l'chazek. Okay, again, unless it's in a place to reinforce the bowl. Aval b'makom she'ein asui l'chazek. In a place where it's not done to reinforce the bowl, chayav leva'er. One is obligated, liable to remove it, destroy it. Miklal de kazayas. Why? Because we have this principle of the olive measurement. Afilu b'makom ha'asui lechazek. Even this version, if it's in a place where it is done to reinforce the bowl, chayav lever. One is obligated to remove it, destroy it. Tanya Kalish Nakama. And we have a Braita that teaches like the first language. Tanya Kalishna Batra. We also have a Braita that teaches it like the second, the Ikadematna. Okay? Tanya Kalishna Kama, the Braita that teaches like the earlier language, says Batsek, Shebesidke Areva, B'makom ha'asui lechazek, that dough that is in the cracks of the kneading trough or bowl, in a place where it's done for reinforcement, eino chotzetz ve'eino over. It doesn't serve as an interposition, and one doesn't transgress. Ubamakom she'ein asui lechazek, but in a place where it's not done for reinforcement, chotzetz ve'over. It does serve as an interposition, and one then would be transgressing. Bamed varim amorim, what are we talking about? Bikazayat, a measurement of at least one olive. Aval bepachot mikazayat, but when it's less than an olive amount, afilu b'makom she'ein asui lechazek, even when it's in a place that it's not done for reinforcing the bowl, eino chotzetz ve'eino over. It does not serve as an interposition, and it does not indicate one is transgressing.
Rabbi Green,
Yes,
when we
yes.
when we say kol that we hold the whole kol shehu, is that only the Rabbanim that we ignore it over here in this Mishnah?
Okay. This particular Mishnah is not, I didn't see it addressing the issue of kol shehu. Okay, I see it addressing a little differently. Okay, we've got a specific principle of kazayas, right?
Yes.
The question is, are we comparing in the Mishnah this issue of kazayas? Can it be compared between the topic of normal dough on Pesach, okay, of which one could be over on the Bal Yoreh Bal Yamatzeh? Does that really compare to the issue of Tumah? Gemara is going to, I think, address this a little bit more detail shortly. Okay. As we continue at this point with the other lashon. Okay. Vatanya b'kelishna batra, and a Braita teaches according to the later language. So what is that? Hold on. Okay, batsek. Again, the dough should be sidkei areva, that are in the cracks of the trough or bowl, b'makom ha'asui lechazek, in a place where it comes to reinforce it, right? Eino chotzetz ve'eino over. It does not serve as an interposition, and in one doesn't transgress. B'makom she'ein asui lechazek, in a place where it's not done to reinforce, chotzetz ve'over. It does serve as an interposition, as an interruption, so to speak, and one is transgressing. Bamed varim amorim, what are we talking about? B'pachot mikazayat, when it's less than a kazayas. Aval b'kazayas, but if the amount of dough is a olive's measurement, right? Afilu b'makom ha'asui lechazek, even in a place where it does come to reinforce, chotzetz ve'aver. Okay, it serves as an interposition, and it does result in transgression. Now, the Gemara's response to the two different lashonos, kashin ahadade. These items are difficult one against the other. Okay, they almost seem to contradict. Okay, now Amar Rav Huna, says Rav Huna, Same Kilta, erase the more lenient view, Mekame Chamirta, from the more stringent view. Okay, now implying, of course, that when we said that if it's done in a place to reinforce, that would be the more lenient, okay, view, that it doesn't chotzeitz and it doesn't transgress. So remove that, he says. Now, Rav Yosef is responding to Rav Huna, Amar, and he said, Tana'ai shakalt ma'alma, an argument regarding Tanaim, you're removing from the world. In other words, Tana'ai, this is really a machloket Tanaim here. The Tanya, because one brightest says, an example, Hapat she'ifsha, if you have bread that's become moldy, chayav leva'er, one is obligated to remove, destroy it. Mepnei she'ra'ui l'shochka. Why? Because it's possible that it will crumble, ulechama, and become chametz, ba kama esod acherot, and cause leavening to a number of other loaves, other dough. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, he comes back and says, B'med varim amurim, what are we talking about here? B'mekuyemet la'achila. Okay, we're talking about only dough. This applies only to dough that is going to be used for eating, for consumption. Aval kupat saor. But let's say we have balls of hardened leaven. Okay, sheyichda liyeshiva. That ball of leaven was set aside for a different purpose, sitting, for example, right? Betela, then in that case, it should be nullified. Mida Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Why? Based on what Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, batla, right? That it's nullified. Miklal, the Tanakama savar lo batla, based on the fact that we derive that the Tanakama disagreed and said it's not nullified. Alma kasavar calls kazayit. Okay, this would seem then to imply that the Tanakama is of the opinion that anything that satisfies the measure of a kazayas, afal gav to mevatel, even though one might nullify it, lo batel, it's not considered nullified. Now, Abaye is going to answer. Amarle Abaye, Abaye says back to him, taratzt bekazayat. Fine, you explained and gave a rationale in terms of the issue of a measure of kazayas. Pachot mi kazayat, mi taratzt. What happens if the ball of hardened leaven, okay, is less than a kazayas? Okay, can you explain what the situation is then? So the answer, Elaha vaha, Rabbi Shimon ben Eliezer, right? That both cases are understood by Rabbi Shimon ben Eliezer, velo kasha, okay, and there's really no problem. Ha b'makom lisha. In one case, we're talking about, okay, where it's the place where the dough is needed, okay. Ha shelo b'makom lisha. And in another situation where the dough is not being needed, in the bowl. Now, Rav Ashi says as follows, going to further try to clarify. Lo tema shelo b'makom lisha. Don't say that it applies, okay, to the place where there is no kneading in the dough. Agaba da agna. Okay, on the, for example, like on the back of the bowl, the underside, ela ashifta da agna, but rather even on the lip, the edge of the bowl. Pshita, mahu detema. Isn't that obvious? So what are you telling us? Zimna da'atif, umate lahatam. It's possible, says Rav Ashi, that there are times when some of the dough will drip and it will come and land on the lip of the bowl. Kamash Malan comes to teach us that even there, okay, that might not have to be destroyed. Amar Rav Nachman, says Rav Nachman Amar Rav, halacha Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Okay, so he's saying, Rav Nachman, that the law is like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Aini, is that really the case, asks the Gemara? V'ha'amar Rav Yitzchak bar Ashi. Amar Rav, says in the name of Rav, what about the following? Imtach paneha batit betela. Okay, if one smears some sort of plaster on the bowl, on the outside of the bowl, right? Then it's nullified. Tach in, if it's plastered, yes. Lo tach lo, which would imply if it's not plastered, no. Man de matneha, but the Gemara says one who teaches this, lo matneha, did not teach this. So continuing, says the Gemara, Ikeda Amri. There are those who say this is what was said. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rav. That Rav Nachman said the following in the name of Rav. Ein halacha ke Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. That the law is not like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. The Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Ashi Amar Rav. For Rav Yitzchak, son of Rav Ashi, bar Ashi, in the name of Rav said, Im tach paneha batit. If one plasters, okay, the face, so to speak, of the bowl with some sort of plaster, batla v'chulei, okay, then it is nullified. Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel. Okay, says Rav Nachman in the name of Shmuel. Okay, Shnei chatza'ei zeitim. What about a situation if we have two halves of pieces of dough? Okay, each of them is only the size of a half olive. V'chut shel batzek beinehen, and we have a thread, a piece of dough running from one, so to speak, small half kazayas of dough to the other half kazayas of dough. Right? So the Gemara continues. Ro'in kol she'elu yinatel hachut v'nit lan imo. Okay. Chayav leva'er. Okay, we see this as if you were to lift up that thread, that strand of dough, and it would lift up the two small balls of half olive size of dough together, it would bring them together. As a result, chayav leva'er, then one would be obligated to destroy it. Ve'im lav, and if not, eno chayav leva'er, one would not be obligated to nullify, to destroy it. Amar Ula. Ula now responds, Lo Amran Ela Ba'areva. This was only said when the dough was still in the bowl, in the trough. Okay. Aval Babayit. Okay. But if we're talking about it being done in the house, in other words, the dough was outside of the bowl. Okay. It was on, let's say, I don't know, a counter. I'll use that phrase, a board or whatever. Okay. Chayav leva'er. One would be obligated to destroy it. My tama, what's the reasoning? It says, Dezimnin de kanish lahu. Okay. That it's possible, we might say, that they would still gather together. V'nafle gabe hadade. And they would therefore, right, they come and be one next to each other. Amar Ula, says Ula, Ba'u b'ma'arava. Okay, they asked the following shaila in Eretz Yisrael. Okay, Bayit va'aliyah mahu. What happens if the dough is in the house and there's also dough on the upper floor? Bayit va'achsadra mahu. What happens if you've got dough in the house and more dough out on the porch? Shnei batim zeh lifnim mizeh. Or what happens if you have dough in two houses? Okay, one in front of the other. Mahu. What's the answer? Teku. Okay, we leave it unanswered. New Braita. Okay, and the Braita is going to say, Hapat she'ifsha. If we have bread, okay, and this bread has become, let's say, moldy, right? V'nifselet mile'echol la'adam. And it is no longer valid to be eaten by a person. V'hakelev yachol la'ochla. But a dog is able to eat it. Okay? So our general definition, remember, ra'ui la'achilat kelev, implies that it's still considered a foodstuff. Therefore, mitam'a tumat ochlin. Okay, it can receive and transmit food tuma. B'kebetza, in the amount, the measure of a egg's volume. V'nisrefet im hatmeya b'pesach, and it should be burnt with any other tamei items in the holiday of Pesach. Mishum Rabbi Natan, okay, right, and from Rabbi Natan, Amru einam et tameya. And Rabbi Natan, they said, okay, that it does not render tuma. Kiman azla, according to whom do we go? Haditnan, like here that's taught in the following. Klal amru, that they said a general principle, b'tohorot, in regarding to tuma and tara. Kol hamiyuchad le'echol adam, any item, all items, okay, that are, I'm going to say, suitable or directed, okay, unique to as a foodstuff. Tameh ad sheyifsel me le'echol lekelev. It will, okay. Therefore, we do not say it becomes invalid unless it is no longer edible for a dog. Come on, according to whom? Delo ke Rabbi Natan, not according to the view of Rabbi Nasa. Tanu Rabbanan. We've got another example in a new Braita. Arevat ha'avdanim. Okay, let's say we have a bowl, okay, or a trough that's used by tanners. And in order to tan the leather, they may add flour, okay, in the process of tanning in order to soften, let's say, the leather. Shenatan letocha kemach, and they've put into this bowl a certain amount of flour. Toch shlosha yamim, if he does so within 3 days of the holiday, Pesach, chayav leva'er, he must remove it. Kodem shlosha yamim, if he does it before 3 days of the holiday, eino chayav leva'er, one does not have to remove it. Amar Rav Natan. Rav Natan now says, B'med varim amorim, what are we talking about? Shelo natan letocha orot. That is a case where he didn't put any hides into the tanner's trough or tanner's bowl. Aval natan letocha orot. But if he put hides already into the bowl or trough, toch shlosha, even during 3 days approaching the holiday, ein chayav leva'er, he is not required to remove it. Amar Rava, says Rava halacha ka Rabbi Natan, that the law is like Rabbi Natan, afilu yom echad, even 1 day before Pesach. Va'afilu sha'a achat, and even 1 hour before Pesach. Okay, which would seem to imply that Rav is referring to another concept, another principle, okay, which some of us are familiar with, notain tam lifgam, again, possibly. So now the Gemara comes back to deal with that, with what I call the seifa of our Mishnah, the issue of Tumah. Le'inyan Tumah, im makpid alav chotzetz. If it is an issue of Tumah and the person is particular about it, okay, then it's considered that dough on the crack is considered an interposition and would render the bowl, okay, tameh, right? Okay, and convey tumah. Ve'im rotzeh b'kiyumo, said our Mishnah. If he wants it to remain as reinforcement, sealing the crack, okay, harehu ka'areva, then it is similar to the bowl, the trough itself. Midami, asks the Gemara, are they really comparable? Hatam b'shi'ura talya milta. In the earlier case, namely what I called our attention to as the Resha in Chametz, we're dealing with a measure. That's the significant thing. Hacha, in this case of Tumah, b'kapeda talya milta. It's more a situation of the person's subjective feeling of how particular they are. That's what it is based on. Amar Rav Yehuda, and Rav Yehuda says, Ema, I would say, Ula'inyan hatuma enochein, that maybe in regards to the issue of Tumah, that's not the case. Amar le Abaye, here, v'chein le'inyan Tumah katani. But here, our Mishnah specifically said that it also applies to the topic of Tumah. That's what the Mishnah is teaching. Ela amar Abaye, hachi ka'amar. But rather, this is what Abaye is saying. Le'inyan siruf Tumah b'Pesach, in regards to the issue of Tumah on Pesach, u'b'sha'ar yamot hashana ika plugta. There is, okay, in regards to the other days of the year, there is an argument. Ha'ichidami, how is that possible? Kagon de'ika pachot mikabetza ochlin. As in the case where there is less than an olive's egg amount, okay, as the foodstuff. V'nag o b'hai batsek, and it came in contact with this dough. B'Pesach de'isuro chashuv mitzaref. On Pesach, okay, its prohibition is due to its considered combination. B'shar yemot hashana, on the rest of the days of the year, b'kpida talia milta. Then it depends on the particular, the stringency of the person. Okay, imakpid alav mitzaref. If one is particular, then he considers it joined. Imrotzeh b'kiyumo. If he wants it simply more for its ongoing existence, harehu ka'areva. That then is considered part of the bowl itself. And we're going to stop right there for today. Okay? All right. Now, again, I said I'm not 100% sure tomorrow what we're going to do. I wish I could tell you if we can stop